Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé, the single life. Let's watch.
I feel like maybe I'm a little bit in denial.
I wake up in the mornings and sometimes I feel like it's a dream. Like, are we actually divorcing? Is this real life? And when the reality sets in, it's really sad. I love Syngin so much. And it's not anything I wanted, but it's what has to be done.
Yeah, this is something that this show doesn't often go into because there's usually a lot more drama and aggressive speak between people as they're breaking up. But it's pretty common to, when you're divorcing, when you're breaking up with any, even if it's not, a marriage that's breaking up, that you're ambivalent, right? On one hand, you're like, yeah, I don't know if I want to be this person. Pretty sure I don't want to be with them. But you still have feelings and you miss that person. And even if you're pretty sure it's the right decision, it's a major change. It's a major adjustment to be like, okay, that person is no longer in my life, or they no longer live with me, or they're going to start dating other people. I'm going to start dating. It's this, even if it's what you want. And I think with this couple, at first I was like, well, what's my opinion? My opinion is that, the way I see it is that the two of them were, they fought a lot. They had all those incompatibilities and would, go through some stretches of time where they had a lot of resentment towards each other. And it didn't seem to get any better. And so, but in terms of the scale of the resentment, I think both of them are pretty differentiated, pretty mature, pretty fair, that the level of their resentment never got super high. It was more in the normal range that I think people see. Think of other cast members on the show and the kind of vitriol that they have towards their partners, Danielle and Muhammad, for example. Well, is that a good example? Anyway, point is that I think we're looking at a pretty typical couple as they break up, and they're in that normal kind of mostly healthy range or halfway healthy range. And so I think that they had many months of bad times and resentment and probably frequent thoughts of, what am I doing in this relationship? I want out. And then that built up to decisions and sort of locked in this decision of like, yeah, we're done. And then, but they still live together. I think they still have sex and they still care about each other. So now he's about to go to Arizona. He feels like he needs to break away from her. And she actually wanted to go. I didn't show that, but she offered to go with him to Arizona on the road trip. And he's like, no, I think for both of our sake, it's important that we just make this a break. Otherwise, you'll probably move in with me in Arizona or something. So I think we're seeing tenderness that is good to have. I think you hear me often talk about our narrative about how we break up and the way we break up with each other is very important. I think a lot of people just burn those bridges and just move on. But there's a lot of benefits to being careful as we break up with people. One is that, they might be a friend. They might be a good support, sort of like an old friend that you check in with every now and then that you don't want to be with romantically or sexually, but that you care about each other and you're looking out for each other. And that is a rare thing in life. And to retain that, I think, is important. The other thing that I often talk about is the way in which we break up determines the narrative that we have and the narrative that we allow the other person to have. So these two, I think, as they break up, they will look back and say, well, they're a good person. Here's, Tania's a good person. Syngin's a good person. But we were just incompatible. He's too much of a free spirit, and that was just driving me bonkers. She's too much of a planner, and she wanted to have kids, and I should have been more honest up front. And so that's a different narrative than, I can't believe how stupid I was to marry that psychopath. If you have that negative narrative, you, one, eliminate the possibility of having a supportive friend for the rest of your life. Two, you eliminate the possibility of having contact post-breakup to mourn the death of the relationship. Three, you convince yourself of a certain narrative that makes you shame yourself and be very distrusting of other people. If you believe, if Tania walks away from the relationship and is like, you know, Syngin was a gaslighting narcissist, you know, whatever. Well, then one, you have to say, well, what's wrong with me that I keep choosing gaslighting narcissists? And two, how many men are like this? You know, are a lot of people like this? How can I trust other people? And we understand that when we shame ourselves and are distrustful of, you know, overly distrustful of others, that creates defenses, which causes more problems in relationships and causes more breakups and more defensiveness and conflict, which again compounds the opportunity to develop, narratives that all men are this way and all women are that way.
Oh my goodness.
I figured you've been packing, you've been a little hectic, you know? And I just thought we should have one last romantic night together. You can take a little bit of break.
Wow. Well, yeah, I surely could.
Yeah, well, not here.
What is one to do but follow you downstairs, right?
Yeah, come on.
The other thing is, I just think it's good to do this sort of thing. It's when we reach a Y in the road and we can choose anger and resentment and pain and, you know, being hostile towards someone else, or we could choose another direction to be soft and considerate and fair and giving other people the benefit of the doubt, giving, altruistic, compassionate, warm. I think choosing the second route, consistently over time leads to just a better life. It just leads to a happier, more satisfying life. Obviously, hostility and anger has its place. I am a big proponent of anger and hostility when there's injustice, but to break up in this way, to have soft moments, to have, just think about all the, we use this as a jumping off point. Think about all the breakups that we've had or all the losses we've had in relationships and all the pain and all the disappointment and all the regret and the worry of hurting other people's feelings and the fact that other people hurt our, there's a lot of pain wrapped up in that. And I think we all collectively deserve to take care of ourselves and take care of each other, even if that's the person that gave us the pain or we're the person that gave them the pain. I think we can hurt other people through relationships, breaking up. That's like, I'm sorry, I'm just not in love with you anymore. And take care of each other in that process. We have this thing in our culture of like clean break, like that D-bag, did it hit him, kick him to the curb, or, she's a blah, blah, blah. And why can't we have breakups like this where you're like, I'm sorry, I don't want to be with you anymore, but I still care about you, and let's roll around. Let's have a drink and roll around for old time's sake. And then, we'll cry and we'll move on. Brings tears to my eyes, really. I mean, just think about how this show would be so different if people did what Tania and Syngin are doing.
I'm just so sad that this couldn't last.
Yeah.
It breaks my heart. I almost feel a little bit at ease that we're breaking up. I feel like our relationship was so much strain and emotional input.
Yeah, it's interesting to see their conversation here. So on one hand, he's just like, oh, you look really great, and I'm so sad that we're breaking up. But then I think he quickly is like, well, wait a second. There's a reason why we're breaking up. And he says, and he didn't insult her. He's just like, I mean, it could be taken as an insult, but he generalizes it to our relationship was so much strain, and our relationship took so much emotional input from both of us. And then we see her face. She seems to be kind of hurt by that. She's like, oh, you're accusing me of something. And maybe he is passively. Maybe she knows, oh, I know what that means. You're saying that I'm hard to deal with. So maybe if he sees that face, he could, in a more diplomatic turn, say, no, I'm not saying anything about you. I'm saying I'm just as much to blame as well. I mean, I'm sure I put you through a lot, and I made you go through a lot of strain, unfairly to you. So I'm not saying, you're the crazy one.
What made me so depressed was the way it's going with this back and forth, this arguing. You think I was depressed because why?
You do nothing but complain about how bored you are, how you don't want to live here, you don't want to do anything. Okay, well, what choices are you trying to make to help change this?
And then me and my wife is still fucking arguing every day. So I don't say anything because I know she'll say something.
Yeah, I think it's, as always on this show, we're being triangulated into conflict. Even though we're not a part of their lives, unless you are, and or interacting with them online. Typically, we're not interacting with them, but we're being triangulated in, meaning that there's tension, and then we feel so when I often talk about, Bowen's idea of the triangle and the triangulation, is that when there's conflict between two people, the tendency is to draw in a third. It's often a person, but it can be a thing or an activity or something like that. And sometimes multiple people can be triangulated in. But the other aspect to this to understand is that not only does the conflictual couple drag someone in, but the third person also pushes themselves into it. So it all happens at the same time. And there's sometimes, varying degrees. It's like a 60-40 kind of a thing. But I say this because even though they're not asking us, as viewers, including me, they're not asking me to become involved in their conflict, I feel compelled into it. And if you're clouded and undifferentiated, a tendency is to side with one person or the other because it makes it easier. It's much harder to hold on to a gray zone and a nuance. It's much easier to say you're the good guy and you're the bad guy. And if you can remain differentiated, you can be like, well, there's two sides to every story. They're triggering each other. It's much harder to do. And a lot of training of therapists involves that ability to remain differentiated in the face of conflict. And it's one of the things that makes marriage and family therapists, in my opinion, better at this sort of thing, because we actually see people in the office. We see everyone there. And if we side with one person and triangulate, the other person will be alienated and it will become very obvious, or it'll give an opportunity to be obvious. Whereas with individual therapy, which is the dominant form of therapy, someone comes into the therapy office and complains about their spouse, and the therapist can be triangulated into that conflict and be completely sided with their client and totally against and villainize the other person outside of the office, and never really realize that they're doing it because they don't have that practice. I mean, when I work with couples and families, it enhances my ability to work with individuals, because when I'm working with individuals, I'm like, what if that other person were here? Because if they were, I'm guessing I would have a completely different vibe in my heart about what's happening. Anyway, so they're having a fight, and I just take note, whenever you're watching this show, of how you're being pulled in and what you're doing. And depending on your upbringing, your family of origin, there might be some tendencies. If you were triangulated into your parents' conflict or other people, if there was general undifferentiation in your family, there's more of a tendency to triangulate in dysfunctional ways, where you're siding with one person, or you make it about yourself, or it's various different dysfunctional ways. The most general functional way to be triangulated is to go, okay, I think I can see both sides. Do I really want to be, in your real life, when you become triangulated, you want to create some flexibility to be distant. If you want to be triangulated and you want to be involved, then go for it. But at the same time, you want the ability to go like, well, this isn't really my problem. This isn't really, I'm feeling anxiety. As your anxiety goes up, you're like, oh, let's pull back a second. I'm absorbing too much of their problem. Let's take a deep breath. I'm still in contact, and that's what good therapy is. You get involved. You're not always distant. That's, in my opinion, a better form of therapy, is you got to have contact. And then the anxiety goes up, you pull back, you take a deep breath. It's not about me, it's their problem. And then you move in, and then you're able to see both sides. Oh, I'm siding with one person. Let's pull back. Let's reorient myself. They're starting to trigger me in terms of what happened. It's that ability to reflect and to be helpful to people. So there's that. The other thing is that it's interesting, and this is common, that as they're breaking up, they're still being triggered. I think particularly her, that I think she just said he didn't work hard enough. So I wonder what that's about. Because on one hand, I think there's a part of her that wishes it could have worked and still wishes it could have worked. I think that's pretty clear, or possibly clear. I think another thing is that I think she has a lot of shame, and she's been shamed throughout her life, I think. And so I think she feels like, is this my fault? And she's like, no, it's not my fault. It's his fault. He didn't give it enough of a chance. You know, people will do that. And he's remaining pretty calm. He's just like, well, you know, there was just a lot of fighting, and well, no, he's not being helpful because he's basically in a calm way blaming her for everything. He should say something like I said earlier, which is, look, honey, yeah, there were times when I felt like you yelled at me a lot, but I know that I did things to you that were horrible, like my attitude, and I basically tricked you into believing I was going to have kids. You know, there's all sorts of things that were totally my fault. So I'm not blaming you. You're partially to blame, but I'm just as much, if not more, to blame. I don't know. You know, something like that I think might help, and hopefully they can take care of each other in that way. But I just wonder what's going on for her. I wonder if there's a much bigger part of her that wants to retain the relationship, some kind of desperation. The other thing I'll talk about is that even when we intellectually know that we should leave someone, sometimes our fear of being alone will override our ability to differentiate and to distance ourselves from someone. So I don't know if that's what's happening.
I don't know how many times I told you, like, you need to put yourself first before you put me first. And instead, you just kept trying to put me first, like staying here in Connecticut, even though I kept saying, I'll move with you. You chose to still be, oh, well, you said you like being near your mom and friends.
Okay, interesting. I didn't know that this was a theme in their relationship. Of course, how would we know all the themes, having seen very little of it? But she's saying, I kept saying to you, you know, put yourself first. Don't put me first. And I was like, huh? Are we missing something here? And then she's saying that you got bored and you put yourself on the back burner, which caused you to feel bad about yourself and our relationship when I kept saying to you, you know, do what you want to do, because I don't want you to put yourself in the back burner. Okay, so it sounds like that was a part of their discussions. But I'm trying to think, is that even true, given what we saw from her behavior? What if he had asserted himself, like, let's not have kids or let's not get married? How would she have reacted, right? She didn't usually react very well to that. But, you know, who knows? Maybe behind the scenes it was much more nuanced. Of course it would be.
I'm not going to make you move.
Yeah.
I never said that. And you would never actually listen to what I was saying.
Blame me for whatever you want.
Syngin, don't challenge me. Because every time I meet your challenge,
okay.
you can never handle it.
I am. Yes, sis. Stop fucking blaming me for shit. Stop putting it back on me.
Okay, so aggressive talk is not welcomed, but they're escalating, and you could see this happening because she's really, I don't know if she was really that much laying into him. He could have easily said something like, yeah, I don't know, maybe you're right, but you didn't make it easy, honey, you know, that kind of stuff. But yeah, this is a microcosm of their problem, which was that they both would blame each other, but I think she was more frequent in her verbal criticism and more global. You know, we hear her, the statement she's saying is like the classic Gottman Four Horsemen of, let's rewind that and see exactly what she said there.
I feel that Syngin didn't try as hard as he could have to save our relationship. Ever since he moved to the States, he's been unhappy.
What made me so depressed was the way it's going with all this back and forth, this arguing. You think it was I was depressed because why?
Right, I actually missed that the first time around. That her narrative is ever since he moved to the States, he's been depressed, and that's why we didn't work out. And he's saying, no, the reason why I was depressed is because of the way you talked to me. Now, we don't know which is true, but it's interesting that she's trying to frame it as it's not my fault, and we wouldn't understand why she'd do that. And the two of them, if I were with them, this is really common in couples, even high-functioning couples, that they don't hear each other, they don't understand each other, they don't take the time to understand each other, they don't allow the other person to say anything without opposing them all the time. And they're both doing that, which escalates, because he could easily say, yeah, you're right, moving to the States did actually, bring me down a little bit. And it was hard. It was, and that did affect our marriage. Yeah. And just you don't have to oppose everything the other person says. You have to, and this is a tip for all y'all out there, is when your partner says something, especially if there's a little bit of tension, try to refrain from opposing them. You don't have to agree with them. I always say that. People have this black and white. It's like, well, if I don't oppose them, I'm just agreeing with them. I'm just passively agreeing. No, you're not. You can absolutely say, okay, what I hear you saying is that you think that because I came to the States that it was bad for me and I didn't like it and I got depressed and that affected our marriage. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Oh, okay. You don't have to agree. You don't have to disagree. But to hear is a huge... People want to be heard. When they say things, they like, did you hear what I said? Do you understand what I just said? So at the very least, you can be like, I hear what you're saying, and I understand I understand your point of view. I understand how you could see it that way, and just move forward. Unless it's absolutely, they're going to break up. They don't need to see eye to eye. They don't need to establish a narrative about their relationship because they're about to break up. So there's no point in debating these issues.
You do nothing but complain about how bored you are, how you don't want to live here, you don't want to do anything. Okay, well, what choices are you trying to make to help change this?
And then me and my wife is still fucking arguing every day. So I don't say anything because I know she'll say something.
Yeah, and I think that it seems like Tania doesn't understand, or maybe when she's triggered, that the way she talks or her perspective comes across in a way that isn't helpful. And I've worked with a lot of people like Tania of various genders. This attitude of, I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of a self-assuredness, kind of a panicky self-assuredness, and overly critical. And there's a real critical narrative that emerges very quickly of like, you always or you never. And it can really degrade the other person's love for you.
Like staying here in Connecticut, even though I kept saying, I'll move with you, you chose to still be, oh, well, you said you like being near your mom and friends. I'm not going to make you move.
Yeah.
I never said that. And you would never actually listen to what I was saying.
Blame me for whatever you want.
Syngin, don't challenge me. Because every time I meet your challenge,
okay.
You can never handle it.
So we hear that it's like, you never listen to me. You can't handle challenge. Whenever I challenge you, you can't like these global things. It's just an onslaught of these like incredibly insulting phrases. A more accurate way and a less triggering way for her to say that is, I feel like you're going to oppose me and I want you to listen to me, please. It's a totally fine, fair thing to say. You always oppose every challenge I have for you. Like, that's not possibly true. You never listen to me. You always do this. You never do that. It's one of those things that in relationships, if you ever find yourself saying you always or you never, stop. Because even if it's true, which it probably isn't, it's not helpful to word it that way. It's much more, think about the nuggets that you can talk about. Honey, in this moment, I just really want you to listen to me. I feel like you're going to get defensive, and I just feel like I really need you to understand what I'm saying. You don't have to agree with it, but I feel like you frequently can get in the way a little bit, but it's less than always, right? Frequently, or you don't often, instead of never. So, yeah, I think for him, he's like trying to make it work. He's not being very helpful, but because there's a lot of things he could be doing that would be different that could help. Like telling her, because I think what's happening is I feel like he's more breaking up with her than she's breaking up with him. I think he's the one pulling the plug and she's like, plug it back in.
Stop putting it back on me. I'm looking after myself right now. Like, I am not here to make you happy anymore. I am not here to sacrifice my happiness for you anymore. And to make, I've been doing it the whole fucking time. I've been doing it for 3.5 years, trying to make you happy, trying to make you comfortable in the situation. But now.
Yeah, I mean, there's not any point in continuing the conversation, especially if he's getting animated like that. If I were her, I'd leave too. So it's probably just good to call it quits.
I'm fucking done, bro.
Yep.
I'm fucking done. I don't have to sugarcoat shit no more.
Yeah.
Fuck this.
Yeah, so he said, I don't have to sugarcoat things anymore. And I think that this is a common thing at the end of a relationship when someone's like, yeah, I'm done. I usually, you know, a couple years ago, I would have been like, okay, I want to say this, but I'm not going to because that'll cause bad things. So I'm gonna bite my tongue. But at this phase, he's like, I'm not gonna bite my tongue anymore. I'm just gonna let you have it because I'm done. I don't want to. I don't care. I don't care if you hate me. You know, that kind of thing. So, yeah, and I wonder how much he had to suppress. You know, because we did see that who knows what was going on behind the scenes, but of the fights we saw on camera, I remember frequently thinking he's really restraining himself. You know, it's sort of, I don't know how, so what do I say about this? It's similar to Ari and Biniam in that when Ari amps up, Biniam like shuts down. And I think they had that dynamic. Him shutting down isn't helpful. Biniam and Syngin shutting down is, you know, and internalizing all that and passive aggressively giving the silent treatment or whatever, it's not helpful and it triggers the other person. But on the scale of things, you'd rather have someone shut down than escalate and become accusatory and attack. It's still not a good thing. You know, the Biniams of the world have responsibilities, but if all you do is shut down, then the chance of things working out are higher, anecdotally in my experience, than if you are frequently attacking verbally and accusing. You know, it's much more destructive. Anyway, so I think he frequently would be, okay, she's having a thing, and how do I manage this? Okay, don't say what you want to say. I think he restrained himself on camera a lot. As often he didn't. And I think at this point he's like, what am I dealing with? And no, I'm not going to restrict. Now, there are much more functional ways he could have said. He'd be like, honey, I feel like you're attacking me and I don't like it. And it feels like it's unfair. You're saying, I don't know what you're trying to say to me, but can we change this? You know, there's a much more mature and fair way that he could have communicated. He got aggressive, which is not okay.
This is not what I wanted, man. You know, I still wanted to hold her for the last night or whatever. It's just, I don't know what to do.
Kudos to him for being vulnerable and talking about what's in his heart, which often the cast members are feeling this, but they don't express it. You know, the Angelas of the world don't say this, but this is probably what's going on. You know, some version of this underneath it all. The Colts of the world, the Larissas of the world are having these kinds of feelings, but they're so traumatized that they don't feel like they can communicate this, or they're not even in touch with it really. But yeah, he's just like, oh, this sucks. I wanted it to be a nice time, and it hurts, and breaking up hurts. It's painful, it's hard, and it's normal to have tears and to have pain, and it's human to experience it.
Sorry.
Was that on purpose? If it was, ouch. Or it could have been an accident. Was that on purpose? Sounds like it might have been on purpose. Or maybe it was an accident.
One last goodbye and then it all ends.
That's the wedding right there. That's what it's come down to, bro. Bits and pieces.
Night was, you know, not a boiling point for us again, and waking up this morning and realizing, fuck, you know, I'm on the couch and we had a big argument again. It breaks my heart. I just want to apologize for the way it went down. I myself was very hot-headed in the moment. I have a lot of frustration in me. I'm very emotional, like.
So good. So he's taking responsibility. He's apologizing for, I think, the right thing to apologize for. And he initiated it. He is offering it up, and it gives her a chance to say, yeah, I'm sorry too. And then maybe they could say goodbye in a less hostile way.
Great night with you, my love, you know?
Yeah.
If I hold on to that, it'll just make me, you know, more sad. Like, coulda, woulda, shoulda. Like, I'm sorry too, because I know what will get under your skin, and I nag, and just always let my anger get the best of me versus.
Okay, great. Tania's saying, I'm sorry. I know what'll get under your skin. I nag at you. I let my anger get the best of me. So it's great. We do not see this kind of taking responsibility, mutual apologies. We do not see that on this show very often. So big kudos to the two of them for that.
That's what we did, even though we loved each other so much. So I thought it's symbolic to us, and then I got, 3 protection stones. I was just to love protecting you, but now, hopefully the spirits will, you know? So that's what I give you to say goodbye.
Yeah, it brings a tear to my eye. It's really nice to see. I mean, say what you will about the two of them and where I think of the couples on this show, they were genuine. They tried to make it work. They tried and would often take responsibility for their own side of things. They'd get triggered and they'd do things to each other. But I think of the couples on the show that we can hold up as people that showed some really admirable qualities and behavior. I think this couple is one, especially right now. I mean, how often do we see this kind of scene? I mean, imagine if we saw this between Nicole and Azan, or Colt and Larissa, or Colt and Jess, or Ed and Rose, or, I guess we kind of saw a little bit of it with Ed and Rose, right? There were future conversations between the two of them that weren't like this, but were at least cordial. And yeah, I think we can all be inspired to think about our own relationships that might need a little bit of this, a little bit of closure, a little bit of reaching out, saying, hey, I just wanted to let you know, I think about you sometimes. I don't want to be with you, but I think about you sometimes, and I have fond memories of you, that kind of thing. We can all think about that. And the two of them have always been good with their emotions, for the most part. The fact that he can cry. I mean, think about Mike and Natalie. Would Mike be able to? I'm sure on the inside, Mike feels this way. I'm quite positive. But he, given his early childhood experiences, doesn't feel safe neurologically or cognitively to express himself this way. But imagine if he could.
Find happiness, just be happy, okay? And I'll always love you.
All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.